Okay, so where should we come around to be able to focus on in today's market? So, a lot of people normally do this when they see prices attempt to be able to make an upward move. Their tendency is to sell their leaders and try to buy the laggards. And in an attempt to switch to something that looks cheaper or something that may look or offer up an opportunity. But when we look at the world of stock trading, particularly with technical analysis, we don't usually take up that particular type of strategy. We look for leaders and we stay with leaders. So what that means is when you see that a strong stock starts to move up and goes to profit taking, yes, we lighten up or we'll take our profits there, and we will wait for those same stocks to come back down into a correction, and we will look to buy those back at better prices. And we will not move our money into a weaker trending stock because it has this semblance of being cheap. Because if you want to be able to track why people buy it, it's because they feel confident that there's something in that stock that could, as it says here, expect the revaluation trend to continue later on. And it's not by looking at the weaker one to be able to provide an opportunity for you. So even if the stock is expensive, right, these stocks reflect investor confidence in their growth potential. And that's the reason they led in the first place. And that's the reason volumes will go in their direction as well. And you will see lasting inflows keep those stocks resilient and try not to back off back to recent lows. Okay, so that's why keep yourself focused on these particular types of issues. These initial leaders will become the leaders again when things start to rally after the correction. So if you can, look for those stocks that are standing over most of their averages or at least half of the averages that we normally use. And again, please steer clear from laggards and down, especially downtrends, because they could just continue heading down. You could probably look at the likes for issues. For example, you can see still weakness from stocks like Nicolasia, Wilcon, Converge, ASEN, and maybe one day they'll have their time of day, but it's not today. And because of that, that means let's just stick to the opportunities that we're seeing today so we can make our money now. One day when those other ones turn around, then we'll always have room to buy them later. Okay, so how do we know and how can we try to keep ourselves fixated on what are the good trends, what are the mediocre trends, and what are the weak trends? So I attempted to be able to draw three basic segments of what market trends should look like in particular phases so that you can generate what is more bullish to neutral to weak. Okay, so what I have over here in green is what we call upswings or uptrends that are just pulling back. just to be able to identify the term. When we talk about a pullback is a minor reaction in a stock. Anything that goes from down 1% to maybe less than 10% is what is known as a pullback. A correction is what you call something that pulls back more than 10%, all the way up to 20%. And of course, a bearish swing is something that goes lower than 20%. So just in case so you want to understand what we mean. So what we're here, we're focused on those climbing up, issues looking like this, the SMs that you've seen, right? The ICTSIs. And those that are now either making patterns or making little pullbacks in price that may not fall more than 10% in terms of that. Because what we're waiting for is for them to correct like this, show a base out or maybe a higher low after this correction, and then buy back on opportunities like this when their corrective trend lines end or if they break out of area patterns. This is what we want to get ourselves back into. Now, there are those that are relatively neutral. You're going to see stocks that are very much in big sideways patterns. I'll show you some of the list of names in a little while so you can identify each one on your own. But the picture here will help you try to situate yourself into what they would look like. So typical sideways motions, you can see that lines are generally horizontal, bouncing from the lows, rallying back to the previous highs, just doing that over and over again. So while they stay there, you'll be buying here and you'll be selling closer to the upper bands of your range. And finally, what I want you to stay out of for the meantime is those issues that are reflecting very weak situations and where particular downtrends are very clear. All of these are downtrends, even this one, because all this did was rally a little bit, try to engage into a little bit more extended recovery that quickly just snuffed itself out and went back into a decline. So there's still quite a bit of issues that look like this or those typical downswings. So it's very important for you to be able to look for issues that are here. This is where your focus should be. If you really must, you can trade those up to here, but you would only be range trading this, buying on the lows, selling on the highs, until one day these things eventually break out. So let me show you what companies in the index belong to all these three categories. So here we have the lineup of 30 index members. And over here, you can see those that are in upswings are the following. You have Bloomberry, ICT, LTG, SM, and PLDT. And those that are engaging pullbacks. And it's quite possible some of this could just be going in here into the next few days. But generally, they're still in an advancing mode. We have Ayala Land, BDO, BPI, CNPF, DMC, GTCAP, Jollibee, Metrobank, Monde, and Semirara. Now, sidewinders, the issues that are stuck in consolidations. You have Ayala Core, AEV, Globe, JD Summit, Meralco, SM Prime, and URC. And I think you can clearly see the laggards and the downtrends here on the right side. So like I said, the focus of what we're doing today is really to concentrate over here. Now, I want to show you some of the techniques that you want to be able to use to look for these issues here on the left side, because since I believe that opportunities will come back to them after the correction, I'll give an idea of how to be able to work yourself out of them in terms of a little profit taking first, and then maybe where areas for buybacks can actually be as well. All right, so let's have a look at those preferred stock picks of advancers that we have. Now, I would have shown you a small list of them, but given the gravity of some of the stocks I saw move today with that 145-point drop in the index, I do want to be able to show you all those 15 issues on the advancing side so that I can lay out the foundation for what you need to do in case you will follow my trend of thought and look for opportunities in this guys later. So let's begin. Bloomberry managed to be able to break out yesterday, but because of the pressure we saw today in the rest of the market, I think it had to submit to it. So now there's threat that it might lock itself back up into an area pattern. But just in case, MACD looks good, just in case we see prices recover back out from that, that should condition another trading buy for us and give us an opportunity to be able to look for potential targets at 1186 to 1280. Now, if you notice my little cheat sheet here, I have a little bit of my trend of thoughts, the technical highlights. I tell you whether you're still in an upswing or not, or what it just did. In this case, it broke out. Whether I think it's a buy or a profit take, you just look at my clues inside here, and I will tell you roughly where I would expect support should be, just in case a pullback comes in here, so that you can appropriately look for potential buybacks. I've also took the liberty of writing out what the distance between support number 1 and 2 is from where current prices are, so that you can make an assessment whether you think you need to be able to sell or not. So for example, in Blueberry, if you're holding this and major support, let's say, is at 1144, that's your first moving average up here, it only shows downside of 1%, so that's not really quite threatening, so that could condition a hold. But even if you look at the lower major of support, which is 1122, it's only a downside of about 2.9%. And so what I would advise you is that I think you should really be taking profits for those issues that show you at least 5% or more, right? That shows enough corrective effort for you to be able to take the profit now and have room for prices to come down and buy back up. Okay? And potentially your upsides after correction ends could range from first resistance, 1186, to about 1280. So I just took the liberty of doing that here, but I'll just be doing that with the same issues that I'll cover in a little while. Okay, ICT also generated some pullbacks, but this has been one of the strongest issues we've had so far and continues to be able to climb into a rising channel. Current support closer to 300, So perhaps if you're looking to do some holding, you might want to be able to trigger profit taking if that 300 is broken. If it's broken, then looking at something between a duck back in closer to 275, maybe even 257 potentially as a potential support target for ICT later on. Potential buybacks moves. Next, we have LTG, which has been very strong. Yes, it's managed to push over the 1030 or at 1030 marker that had established a potential resistance zone. But it looks like the last few days we've been seeing quite a bit of influence that seems to be quite unusual. So it looks artificially generated, and because of which I think I would still try to be able to take a little bit of some profits, because just like I showed you earlier, here's a situation, you have an extended movement. It's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up days, and you want to be able to try to be able to walk out with some degree of profits, and then allow this to be able to bank off later and look for your buybacks later. Maybe something closer to about 980 or 947 later on for buybacks. Then we have SM. So with the chart I showed you earlier, looks okay that we did to take some profits closer to that 1,000. And now we wait for prices to be able to look for next support. I'm looking between 954, maybe even 930 as a potential slide back for SM later on. PLDT, well, I think there was an opportunity over here. If some of you were lucky enough to have had this stock or maybe bought it when it broke out on this day, in 1 day's time, it was up 6%, and that normally is quite a world for PLDT to be able to come by already. In fact, PHI in the US was up 16% on that day. And I think when you have windfall profits like that, you want to be able to take some first. That clearly is a bird in the hand. Don't let it fly away and take your profit. And now, sure enough, today we had a bit of a sell-off. Now we want to wait for support to be able to carry forward. I'm looking at something closer to 1330. At the speed of the way it dropped today, maybe it could even go a little bit lower than that, 1330, maybe to even 1320 or even 1310. That's the breakout point that it moved back here first. So look there later on. Ayala Land. So Ayala Land has managed to be able to soften up, and this is still coming off a particular type of weakness that is still not suggestive of a base. But I think I'll be looking for potential support actions into this next decline, especially as second levels of support are now going to be hit. And I'm looking somewhere between 30.50, maybe even 30 as a potential area for you to start looking your buyback campaigns. All right. Then we have BDO. And BDO managed to be able to make two double highs here. That could be a potential double top into a short term. That did gap down today to be able to threaten support, which we have at 147.40. A crack of that should be able to widen its correction back to 143. And maybe even go all the way up to maybe even 135, 137 or 135, which is where the 200-day moving average currently is. So that could be, again, potential buyback areas for BDOs. I think BPI, following the suit of BDO, is also now probably going to make a sideways pattern, if not show a lower high here. And we should also see a potential swing downwards between 115 to 111 for BPI. And again, that being your next level of major support. As you can clearly see, there is an uptrend line holding itself up here. Potentially, this will be our next target for support and for next buyback campaigns. CNPF, well, I'm currently watching this area pattern that it's generating, but again, from an uptrend to a sideways trend. And now, since it's sideways, we have to wait for its decision. And clearly, either what we want to see is it falls back to support and rebounds, in which we can do a range trade, buying here and selling here. Or one day, if this manages to break over 36.50 and break out, and that condition ourselves a new buy for potential swing up to 38.80 or even 39 potentially for CNPF. Now, DMC, I was writing this earlier, the stock price was still over here. And if you notice, the support that I indicated here was just massacred on the closing today. So Since my support stop was triggered, I identified it here as a support stop. That means that I have to be able to lighten down on this particular move. This looks like a wedge type pattern, which just cracked today. That means that we have to be more defensive. I hope this can rally first to provide that opportunity to sell. So if it does rally, please use it as an opportunity to take some profits if you're making money, or at least lighten down if you're not. Because I don't think this ends like this. Potentially, this could swing down, as I pointed out here, between 1062 to 1020. 1020 will be somewhere lower in this area here. So please be watchful of that. Then we have GTCAP. The nice thing about GTCAP is it's been relatively strong, just like ICTSI. Also started climbing earlier than many and climbed up with very, very nice channel type formations. And even in its corrections, it was doing it in a very, very slow pace. So it seems to be well organized and orchestrated. But given the fact that I think that the corrective channel can come up, I think it's okay to take some profits for now. Looking for buybacks between 655 and potentially maybe 632. Somewhere there might be a better opportunity for us for look for GT. Jollibee is also entering a sideways pattern. And just to give you a sense of what I mean by increased volatility, if you notice into an uptrend, you can see that it seems to be very clear, just moving up. Very rarely do you see even corrections. At most, you get 2 or 3 days and then climbs back up to a new high right away. But then look what happens here. Then look at the down. All of a sudden, the downs become wider. Rallies almost the same space. Then the down move goes all the way back to where it's come from. Excuse me. This is what we mean by increased volatility. Now, remember I said earlier, volatility increases on major tops and major bottoms. So if we're clearly not coming from this and we're seeing volatility from here, that means it is quite suggestive that this could be a potential temporary top. And so what we want to do in rallies such as this, since we're coming closer to the resistance of the high band, we take our profit first, back off, and wait for potential wider corrections to be able to give us better entries. So for Jollibee, looking later, 241, maybe 232 as potential buyback here. Then we have Metrobank. So Metrobank, just like BDO, just like BPI, same thing, tried to make a rally, failed to go back to a new high. Now it's feeling some pressure, so I would assume that it will generate the same type of corrective structure. So take some profits first, and we'll look for buybacks along the extended swings of these reactive channel that we're looking at between maybe 59.30 to 57.75, and maybe if it's just a little bit weaker than usual, maybe even 56.10. Then we have MONDE. Now, maybe many of you remember that April and I were quite bullish on this when we did our last outlook, and I generated this cup and handle formation. At that time, you were still down here, and sure enough, it did break out. It went very much faster upwards, but now it's doing another corrective movement, so we've encapsulated it into a reactive channel. So we'll watch this as it comes down. Maybe 957 to 916 might provide an opportunity to buy back at those better prices. Ideally, that should not go back down to the previous breakout zone. I mean, that clearly would not be a good thing. So we want to see a higher low than what we've seen from this breakout area here. So look for potential buybacks from MONDE. Now, if it doesn't go all the way back down to this move, another thing you can do is you can wait for a potential breakout. So if this downward trend line here breaks out before hitting your support, then you follow through. You have to buy that because that potentially could be a continuation pattern. And if that moves, at least it will come back to 1088 first, and my target 1150 to 1170 as the next measured move for Monday. Semirara. So Semirara has been climbing up into a channel as well. Unfortunately, the last previous high was not broken, so we saw a high at 34.65. We see momentum starting to weaken, and because of that, I would expect that we might see a pullback closer to 33, maybe even streak down to 31.40, maybe in a worst case scenario about 30.60. So in this case like this, since we're breaking out of this type of pattern, remember there was a gap down here. it almost closed the gap here, and now there should be major resistance at this end. So maybe what I'll do here for a buyback, I will wait for prices to fall, create an area pattern like two lows, and then wait for the breakout of the downtrend line or an area pattern before I would buy this back. Although this is still amongst the uptrends, I would just submit that this is among the weaker ones, technically amongst the list that I've given you. So don't be too much in a hurry if this breaks down. Okay, allow the reversals to be able to show itself to you first. Okay, so there you have it. Those are roughly the 15 issues that I've had into uptrends. And these are the ones that I would implore you to be able to look at first in terms of potential buybacks. And as a consequence, if corrections come out and those neutral to lagging stocks, you really want to be able to keep them on the side for now and only come back to them when you actually see reversal signs being shown by them. Because for now, I think the volume flows will remain in those first ones that we talked about, and that will provide better opportunity for you guys to be able to make money.